registered at all to come, they can just send me an email and probably get the same information quicker than if they signed up for an awkward Zoom conference. So there's no extra credit for coming, there's no really added bonus. So if your parents don't want to, do not make them. Let them do what they want, right? Okay, any questions about parent-teacher conferences? Okay, cool. Today we are going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about quote burgering and counterclaims, okay? So, I want to remind everyone on Canvas where you go to figure out what you're supposed to do for this class. So I keep getting emails that are like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. But you haven't read the weekly overview, is what that means. So, when you go to Canvas, for this class, the home screen are the modules. And then every week there is a new module. Okay? So when you want to figure out what you're supposed to do that week for English, you will go to that module and you will click the weekly overview, which is a step-by-step checklist of what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? So if you click on that, it's like, okay, this week in class we will, and it will list the things we do in class with helpful links to all of the things. And then it'll say at home this week you will, and it will tell you what you need to do at home. So, super useful. Don't just ask me, because that just takes a lot of work when I've already written it out for you, right? So, there you go, okay? If you don't remember what you were supposed to do for previous weeks, those modules are still available on Canvas. So you could go and be like, oh crap, I missed class on the 3rd of September. You could go down to where those dates are and read that weekly overview, and it would walk you through what you need to do for that time that you missed, okay? So everything you need to be successful is on Canvas, okay? There's even a film of like the video for the class if you missed it. You could rewatch class, watch it at double speed, whatever you want, right? But those are all there for you. Okay, so this week we're going to add to our writer's notebook. So if you go to your Google Drive and open it there, that is better than opening it through Canvas, because sometimes it like replaces it and erases everything you did, which would be bad. And it doesn't happen if you do it from Google Drive. So go on Google Drive, click on your Term 1 Writer's Notebook, and you're going to add an entry titled 5 Quote Burgering Counterclaim Paragraphs 9/16, because today is the 16th of the 9th month. Get it? Woo. From this PowerPoint, you won't need to write down, like there are some slides where you don't need to write everything down, but you might want to look at that information later when you're writing your essay. So I have put the PowerPoint down here where it says, here is a link to the Google Slides we used to take notes from in class on that. Okay? So that you could click on it there and pull up the stuff that you didn't write down, but that might be useful to you. Okay? And that'll make sense in a second. So, we're going to talk about contextualizing quotes in your essay. But first, I just want my computer to break. That's what I want. What the heck? Okay. First, I just want to review really quick, what were the 4 types of sentences in a body paragraph that we talked about last time? Give me one, May. Yeah. Evidence, good. What else? Yes. Commentary, good. What else? Elijah, what's another one? So they said evidence and commentary.
An introduction to the quote? Before the quote?
We're going to talk about that today, but the 4 types of sentences we talked about last time in our body paragraphs.
Citation, but that's probably for the.
Yeah, these are all things we're going to talk about today, so that's great. You're just like ahead. Yes.
Statement.
Which kind of statement?
Like the topic statement.
Beautiful. Topic sentence. Okay. So your topic sentence is what you start with, which has your claim in it. Then you're going to put evidence where you're going to cite it. You're going to introduce it, just like Elijah said. Commentary. And what's the last kind of sentence?
Conclusion.
yeah, a concluding sentence, okay? So we talked about that, counterclaims, or sorry, we're not talking about counterclaims yet, sorry, my brain is fried, it's been a really long day. So, I want to talk about something that's going to improve your body paragraph, and kind of like what Elijah was getting at, how to incorporate your evidence into what you're saying smoothly and clearly, okay? We're gonna look at this is part of a body paragraph, and I want you to tell me what is confusing about this paragraph, okay? So it says, one example of a weak female character in Finding Nemo is Dory, the forgetful fish that Marlin finds lost in the middle of the ocean while searching for a son. When they first meet, Dory admits that she can't seem to remember anything at all, and her memory resets every few seconds. However, as time progresses, Dory begins to retain and recall information better the longer she's with Marlin. P. Sherman, 42 Weldon Way, Sydney, Disney 85. This is the kind of memory task that would have been impossible for Dory only days before meeting Marlin. It is like the influence of Marlin, a male, is helping this poor fish to be whole. As long as Dory is with Marlin, she's able to recall necessary information. What is confusing about that paragraph? Yes, Sam.
It just randomly says P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney.
Yeah, you're like, did this person accidentally like add an address that they meant for a different document in here? Or like, do they have Tourette's? I don't really know what's happening, but that's just like in there. Now, if you'd watched the movie, maybe you could make some connections there. But if you've never seen the movie, you're like completely confused, right? This is weird. Here's like another confusing portion of a paragraph. However, halfway through the journey to find Nemo, Marlin sends Dory away, and finding herself manless, Dory's memory slips again. Nope, name doesn't ring a bell. Without a man, she's hopelessly lost. It isn't until she finds Nemo that her memory of Marlin returns. What's confusing there? Yes.
Same thing, just like the evidence she used, she didn't put any background.
Yes. Again, it just is in there. You have no idea what was going on, okay? This is like you're dropping quotes like anvils into your essay, right? You're just like, I know I need evidence, so I'm just gonna put that quote in there. But you don't like help them at all. And it's just hitting your reader in the head, and they're confused, dazed, and possibly dead, right? So that is bad. I had a friend growing up, who, one time we were driving in this car, and we weren't saying anything, like, you know, there's like those friends you can hang and not say anything, right? So, silent, then all of a sudden she turns and she's like, that's really messed up, huh? And I was like, what? She's like, and then she was like kind of mad, she's like, that is really messed up, right? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, what's messed up? She was like, oh yeah, that was all in my head, let me explain. So then she backs up, she tells me what about the situation, like tells me about the situation, and then asks, that's messed up, and of course I'm like, well yeah, that is messed up, right? Because now I have context.
My little brother does that.
Right? Like they're having like these conversations in your head. When you just put evidence into a paragraph without contextualizing it first, you are having a conversation in your head that nobody else is a part of. And it's confusing for your reader. And we don't want that. That is bad. Okay? So, we are going to contextualize our quote. So what does it mean when I say contextualize a quote? Yes?
Like maybe say, like with the Dory example, Dory said.
Yeah.
Or like, so-and-so said, or from this, or in the movie it said.
Perfect, right? You're giving context to it by saying who is speaking or where you're pulling this quote from. I'm pulling it from a movie. I'm pulling it from this situation. Maybe here's what's going on. But you're giving info so that that quote makes sense. You know where it's coming from. So write this down. To contextualize a quote, and remember, write it shorter, right? You don't want to write for every word that I'm writing. Provide info that embeds the quote into the essay and a particular sentence seamlessly, right? So it's smooth in there. It doesn't just be like 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. What? We don't want that. Okay. It also gives enough info to let the reader know where the quote is coming from, who is saying it, etc. And then sometimes, if you're being like really sophisticated or it makes sense in the sentence, you're even kind of explaining a little bit beforehand why it's important. So why is this significant, and you're explaining some of that relationship in that context beforehand. This doesn't always work or flow with what you're doing, but sometimes you can embed that before the quote, and that's great, because remember, you're making an argument, and if you can explain why this is important before they get to it, they're starting to agree with you even before they see the evidence, which is great. Okay. So, y'all know how much I love analogies or like comparisons, right? So, I like to think of contextualizing a quote or blending a quote into your essay, like making a burger. Okay, now think about a burger. There are like 3 main parts to any burger. You can add lots of crap to burgers, right? But like, those are all just like bonus. But there are 3 main components to any burger. What are those components? Yeah. The buns, right? So I counted those as 2, right? You need a top bun and a bottom bun. Not just one. And then what else? The patty. Oh, sorry. Yes, the patty, right? Now, I want you to imagine you go into a restaurant and you're like, I would like 1 hamburger, please. And they're like, okay, great. And they bring you out just the meat patty. You're like, what? I did not order the low carb option. Like I wanted the bun, I wanted the whole thing, right? You'd be like, this is not what I wanted. Or let's say they come out and they just bring you the buns. You're like, is this like my appetizer roll? Like what is this, right? If they forget any of those parts, you are not getting what you ordered, right? If you forget any of the parts that I'm gonna talk about here, you do not have a very well contextualized quote. You are missing something. So you need all of them. Okay, usually if you're handwriting notes, I have you draw pictures, but in this case, it might be difficult on there to do that. So you can just write down top bun, patty, bottom bun, and then list the things. So like here, I might just be like, top bun, patty, top, batty, I'm batty, and then bottom bun, and then we'll list kind of what each is doing. Okay. So, the top bun, when you are burgering or contextualizing your quote, it's introducing, okay? It's saying, who is talking? To whom? What is going on in this situation? Where did you get it from? And you punctuate it correctly as well so that it flows, okay? That is your top bun. That signals to your reader that they have a quote. It signals to the person sitting down that it is in fact a burger when there is a bun on top of it, right? Okay, now the patty is the quote itself, right? So you contextualize it first, you signal that there's a quote coming, and then you put the quote. And confusingly enough, you put a quote in quotation marks. That's not confusing at all, right? That makes sense. That's why they're called quotation marks, okay? So you put that in the quotation marks, and then you also want to cite where you took that from. So you take the author's last name, and you put it here, and then the page number. That's not a hashtag, that used to stand for number, before the whole hashtag phrase. So I'd be like, Smith 20, that's from page 20. So I'll show you some examples. Yeah?
So if our like resources don't have page numbers, how would we do that?
I will show you on the cheat sheet in just a moment. So this is like the most basic, if you have all the information, this is what it should look like, and then I'll show you like contingency plans. Okay. And then once you're done citing the author's last name and page number, you put parentheses around it, and you put a period on the end. You always have the period here after it at the end of your sentence, because it shows that this citation goes with the quote and not with the next sentence. If you just had the period here and this after it, but no period here, you might think that that citation was going with the next sentence, which is not in fact true. So you always put a period here, and if it ended with a period, your quote right here, you just leave that out because you already have a period here. But if it ended with an exclamation mark, you would leave the exclamation mark here to show emotion, like it was exclaimed, and that would be important for your reader to know, and then you still put the period here. So I'll show you some examples of that too. Okay, and then the bottom bun is your commentary. So you need to explain now, like how that quote is connected connecting back to your argument, right? Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. If someone brings you a burger with just the patty and the top bun, you're getting meat juice all over your pants, they're ruined. Then you have to go pants shopping, which is like the worst kind of shopping, right? I always cry. I just hate it. And that would be bad. So you need that commentary to kind of bring it all together and make sense in your paragraph, okay? Yeah? Okay, so let's see an example of this. So let's say I wanted to use this quote from page 1 of Sherman Alexie's story called Superman to Me. Okay, we read that last time, like the paragraph, and like how it was like a fence. This is the same story. So it starts out, I learned to read with a Superman comic book, simple enough, I suppose. I cannot recall which particular Superman comic book I read, nor can I remember which villain he fought in that issue. Okay, I want to take that yellow part out and use it as my quote, and my essay for whatever reason. So first, like, just to format the quote correctly, I would put the quote into quotation marks inside the author's last name and page number in parentheses after the quote, like this. So I would take the part in the highlight, put the quotation marks around it. It ended with a period, so I can take that out because I put a period here. This is the author's last name, and then space, and the page number. You don't need to put like PG, period, you just put the number, okay? And then a period on the outside. If this had been a question, I would have left the question mark there. But because it just ended in a period, I just left that out because I already have one there. Does that make sense? Okay, now I need to put that top one on because this is an anvil, if I just put that in like that, right? And because I've taken it out of the story, I don't really know what's going on and why he's recalling the Superman and me unless I've already read the article. So I want to embed some of that context into that top bun. So I would say something like, when thinking about how he learned to read from comic books, Sherman admits, I cannot recall which blah, 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 right? So, I've taken the context that was said in those other sentences that I left out of my quote, and I put it into my top bun. You wouldn't know that he can't recall which Superman comic book when he's thinking about how he learned to read unless I told you that. And so that creates like the situation, tells me who's talking, and why he's thinking about it, like this not being able to recall it, okay? Does that make sense? So I've just plugged in that context that I cut out by leaving out part of the story. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that top bun. I actually want to change one of this word from and to or. Okay. So, when you make that top bun, you're introducing the quote. That's what you're doing. You're saying, this is where I took it from, so that your reader's not like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You want them to be on your same page. Okay, why don't I do that? There we go. So, you can use beforehand either a signal phrase or a reporting verb. And I'll show you on the next page what those look like. But I want you to write down, for your top bun, introduce it with a signal phrase or reporting verb. So write just that down for this slide. So here, if I took a quote from this guy, Robin Lakoff, I'm using a reporting verb here where I'd say like, okay, Robin Lakoff argues that, and then I put the quote after that, right? A signal phrase would be something that's like signaling that I'm taking it from somewhere. So according to an accredited firm, so I put like according to, and then added like what I'm taking it from, like the entity that I'm taking it from. And then I put my quote here. That's like I'm signaling that a quote is coming. Or in the text, it affirms that, so like another signaling thing, like in whatever the work is I took it from, and a reporting verb. I use both. It was crazy. Okay. Some examples of stuff that you could use, and this is why you may want to look at this slideshow again, because you don't need to write these down. You could just come here and like I don't really know how to introduce it. Which one should I use? You could come and steal some of these phrases to put in your essay. So you could say like according to, or in her article, or in the opinion of, insert author's name. Author's name suggests that, author's name argues that, so they're taking these verbs, or author's name plus any of those reporting verbs, okay? Now these are all different ways to say something besides says, right? Because you could say like Lakoff says, and you're not wrong, but you're also not adding anything say something like, Lakoff refutes, or argues, or disputes, you know that whatever they're saying is going against whatever you just talked about. And that would be like a helpful hint to your reader as they're going through. They're like, I know that this quote is gonna negate whatever they were saying before or argue against it. If you wanted to talk about that they're just kind of agreeing with what happened before, you could say that they agree, or they confirm, or they affirm right here. Any of those would like kind of show agreement with whatever you're talking about. So you can use verbs that actually give your reader more information than just saying they said this, right? Sometimes you can use that, but like you wanna use like different vocabulary and more useful vocabulary if you can, okay? So this slide, again, you can just steal on Canvas when you go back to write your essay, okay? So let's look back and say that we recontextualized those quotes that sucked before, okay? So instead of just having P. Sherman 42 Wallaby Way Sydney's thrown in there, now it says, however, as time progresses, Dory begins to retain and recall information better the longer she is with Marlin. For instance, she recites multiple times the information found on the back of a dyed mask, which reads, P. Sherman 42 Wallaby Way Sydney. This is the kind of memory test that would have been impossible for Dory, blah, 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 commentary, okay? What context does this give us now that we didn't have before? Kia?
Where the address is coming from.
Yeah, and where's it coming from?
From Dory.
From Dory, and she's reading it from where? The back of a dive mask. Did you want to add anything to that, CJ?
The verb, the action verb.
Yeah, it's got that action verb, which like she recites. That's like a good one. So we know exactly what's going on in the situation. Whereas before it was like Tourette's, 42 Wallaby Way Sydney. Like, why do we care about that? Well, here's why we care. Here's what I didn't tell you and what I took out when I just quoted this part, right? So that's much better. Same thing with this one, it added the context back in. However, halfway through the journey to find Nemo, Marlin sends Dory away. And finding herself manless, Dory's memory slips again. During this time alone, someone asks her if she knows of a fish named Marlin, and Dory replies, nope, name doesn't ring a bell, despite the fact that she's just been with Marlin for days on end, not long before, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what context did I add back in there that helps us to make sense of this quote? Yes.
You like added that they're asking about Marlin, so you knew that she had known him before.
Good, right? And that is important for the argument I'm making. Yes.
You actually explain it, but even if they haven't seen the movie, they'll still understand why the quote is important.
Yes, right. And you haven't told the whole story again. You're not like telling like, so anyway, she's swimming around and she comes up to this guy and this guy is like this kind of, like you don't need all that stuff, right? You just give a very basic, like, blurb about what was happening in that scene. And only the stuff you need to understand why that quote's important, right? So I'm not gonna talk about their turtle, like, fun where they're on like that, whatever current, right, with Shell or Crush or whatever his name is, right? Because that doesn't matter to this quote. I'm only gonna focus on the context they need to understand why this is important to my argument. Cool. Any questions on that? Okay, so in your essays this week, you are going to add in like quote burgering if you didn't do that with your quotes. And I want you to write this down too. You never, 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 ever start a sentence in your body paragraphs with a quote. You always need that contextualized piece before that blends into the quote. You don't want to put it after, you want to put it before, so it makes sense right up front. So yeah, you'll go back, if you didn't contextualize your quotes before, or you just said says on everything, add some different verbs in there, okay, and contextualize those so it makes sense in your argument, okay? Okay, let's talk about the cheat sheet, like your question made. So I've also included a cheat sheet on Canvas that goes over like what you put in those parentheses and how you cite different quotes. So, if you have a normal sentence, you just put the quote in quotation marks, and then in parentheses after it, you include the author's last name with a space, and then the page number. You don't put like P dot that, or PG dot that, or page, you just put the number, okay, and then the period goes on the outside. This is like the most basic. So each of these has like an example, and then the rule of what it is. So for a normal sentence, the quote in quotation marks, then the author's last name and page number in parentheses, and it tells you that, okay? If you had a question mark or exclamation mark as end punctuation, you would put the quote inside quotation marks, including the question mark or exclamation mark, and then the author's last name and page number in parentheses. Put a period on the outside of the parentheses. So here, it's the same thing as above, except for I leave that question mark there, and I still have the period here, okay? If I quote a passage where someone is speaking, this will probably happen a lot more in like, when we're reading books about like fiction instead of like these articles. But the rule for that is you put the quote, so everything you took from the text, inside the quotation marks. Then put the part of the quote where someone is speaking inside apostrophes instead of having quotation marks there. Then put the author's last name and page number in the parentheses, put a period on the outside of the parentheses. So, let's say I wanted to take the quote, "Don't worry, Liesel, Papa said," from The Book Thief. This part, "Don't worry, Liesel," is actually Papa talking, right? Whereas this is just saying that he's talking. So, I put apostrophes around the part where he's talking, so "Don't worry, Liesel," to show that he's speaking there. And then I put quotation marks around everything that I'm taking from the book to show that it's quoted. If I didn't include the Papa said, then this would just have like 3 here too, right? Because I would have the apostrophe and then quotation marks there. Okay, a long quote. Hopefully you're not using long quotes in this essay, because remember, you have to have double the amount of commentary. So you only need to use long quote format if you're taking something and it ends up being more than 4 lines long, like you hit a 5th line, then you have to do a long quote format. And it's kind of confusing, so if you can avoid it, you want to. Usually you're only using long quotes like this for like really long essays. But you would put your context before the quote. So in this case, Nellie Dean trusts Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him through her narration. And then I put a colon at the end of the context. Then I have to indent the entire quote. Then I have to put where I got it from. And since there's not a sentence here, I just put the period here instead of on that side. And then because it's the same paragraph that I'm putting my commentary in, I don't indent where I start writing again, not from the book. And then this is super, super long, because this is super, super long, right? To avoid long quotes, maybe you only need like this little part and this little part, and you actually don't need all this crap in the middle. You can take it out by putting an ellipses in there, which is that dot, dot, dot. So if I just wanted to take out a big chunk of it and have the beginning and the end of it, I just put a dot, dot, dot in the middle where I took stuff out to show that I took stuff out. So maybe this is like, he loved everything about summer. He loved like the days and the nights and the blah, blah, blah. But all I really want is like that "to swim" at the end of that list. I can just be like, he loved dot, 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 or sorry, just 3 dots. Got a little excited there. Dot, 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 to swim. And then just quote the opposite page number. This is probably the best thing to do when you've got a huge quote, so that you don't have to write as much commentary, right? Now, when you don't know the author, that was, or maybe yours was the page number, but we're getting there. So, if you don't know who the author is, you just cite what you do know. Cite the title of the work and the page number. So, say I go to this article called Taco Statistics, and there's like 20 pages of it, right? And I take this quote from there, but it doesn't say who the author is. I would just put the title of the essay in quotation marks to show that it's like a short work and not a book, and the page number, okay? Because I don't have an author's name, I don't know who wrote it. If I don't know the page number, let's say it's just like one big website and there are no pages, but it has an author's last name, I just put the author's last name in there. If it didn't have an author on it and it didn't have a page number, it's like a corporate like website, right? And it's just like, I don't know, like I would just take the title and put it there instead. So you just kind of cite what you do know. If you have a bunch of authors, so you have an article that has like 4 authors, then if you have 1 to 3 authors, you list all the last names with the page number. I don't know why there's a semicolon there, I'm gonna delete that. If there are 4 or more authors, then you just cite the first person's last name, and then put et al. Dot, and then 90. Okay, this just means plus everyone else. So that way you don't have to write them all, you just write that first person's, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So, that is a cheat sheet, and it's helpful, and it's on Canvas, so that you can look at whatever you need, okay? Yes?
Is there like just websites, like what if I'm looking up just like statistics?
You still need to cite it, right?
Yeah.
And so if you just look at the statistic, you go to the website, and it doesn't have like an author's name, is that what you're asking, or?
Yeah, also like the page number, like do I have to put a page number?
If it has a page number, then yes. If it doesn't have a page number, then you just put the title of the article.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you would just be like, if it's like cool stats, that's like the name of that page, you would put cool stats in quotation marks.
And would you have to do the website too, right, somewhere?
You don't need to put like the whole like .com, whatever thing. You save that for your works cited page. You just put the title of the article there.
Oh,
That makes sense, because otherwise it's like really long and bulky, like right in the middle of your
Yeah.
essay. Yeah. Good question. Other questions? Okay, so you're gonna burger all of your quotes so beautifully, right? We're also gonna talk today about counterclaims. How many of you have done counterclaims or heard of counterclaims before? Okay, cool. So this should be sort of review. If you haven't, that's okay. You're gonna learn about it today, so that's great. So a counterclaim is another type of paragraph in your essay, right? Last time you wrote body paragraphs, and those are all just like reasons that support your claim. What a counterclaim does then, it says like, I know that people disagree with me, and this is why they might disagree with me. However, here's why my reason is still better than theirs. So you're saying, I acknowledge you, and that you might view things differently than me, but you're wrong, and here's why. But in like a nice way, right? So, purpose of a counterclaim, write this down, is to acknowledge your opposition. It's always nice in an argument to say like, I see where you're coming from. That makes them feel good and like you're listening to them, right? And that is good for conflict resolution, okay? It also proves that you've done your research. So if you say like, let's say you just like write an essay and you never like acknowledge that people think differently, people are like, maybe they're only arguing this because they don't know about anything else. Like they don't know all of the other options. So by acknowledging some of those other options, you look like you've done all of your research, right? You are a well-informed source. And then it also strengthens your argument because you're proving that your claim is stronger than the opposition. Because you're gonna say, I see what you're saying, but my reason's better, and here's why. So that actually strengthens your argument because now your claim has totally crushed another one instead of just being like, here's my claim, but you don't like weigh it in against anyone else's ideas, right? So this is gonna strengthen your argument. So let's talk about what you need in a counterclaim, kind of what it should have in it. So your counterclaim should first, and you're writing this down, acknowledge a logical, keyword logical counterclaim to your thesis. Okay, if it's an illogical counterclaim, you don't need to acknowledge it. So let's say you're arguing that we need to turn to green energy sources in order to help the planet or whatever. If you say, now some people might think we don't need to do this because aliens are just gonna take over anyway, that is not a logical counterclaim. You don't need to acknowledge that because even if you beat that by saying we don't know that aliens are gonna come, that really doesn't make you look any stronger because that was crazy in the first place, right? But let's say someone is like, okay, but nobody can afford to do energy like this. So we're actually gonna lose a lot of like helpful technology and people are gonna lose jobs and it's gonna be really bad for like everyone if we use green technology that's too expensive. That's like a logical counterclaim. That's like a good reason for not using green energy. So then you could respond to that and it would make your argument stronger if you can disprove that it's too expensive and that we should still use green energy, okay? So logical counterclaim, you don't need to acknowledge the crazy people, okay? You wanna give logical reasons why people might agree with that, so you can say like, I see why you think that. It is scary to think that we wouldn't have money to support our society if we pay for more expensive green energy. So you're like, yes, I see that, and I know why you think that. That makes you look really informed. And then you're gonna construct your rebuttal, and your rebuttal is the key to making the counterclaim paragraph work for you. You're gonna have a transition that flips your paragraph from acknowledging the counterclaim to then proving your own claim. So something like you state the counterclaim, you're like, some people think that we should not turn to green energy because it's too expensive and can be harmful to a country's economy. However, right, that's a transition that's like, now I'm gonna tell you why that's wrong. Or even though, like all of those are really good transitions to flip into your rebuttal. Okay? Then you're gonna reassert what your thesis is. However, this is not true because there are actually cost-effective ways to do this. And then you're gonna list a bunch of evidence about why your claim can combat whatever that problem is, or why it's more logical than what these other people are saying. If you forget to put a rebuttal into your counterclaim paragraph, then all you've done is be like, some people think this is a bad idea because it's too expensive. And if you don't like explain why it's still okay to go with green energy, then all you've done is like tear away at your argument, right? Someone might be like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I actually agree with them. Unless you rebuttal it and say, no, and here's why, right? I see a lot of kids in my classes do that, where they just like state what the counterclaim is, but they don't disprove it. And it's like, okay, now you've just weakened your argument. That's bad, right? You want to use it and explain why you're still better. Does that make sense? Okay, we're gonna see a real life counterclaim paragraph where I can explain to you kind of where this stuff is going on in the paragraph. You don't need to write it down. Okay? Now, your counterclaim paragraph should be as chunky as your body paragraphs. So these are chunky paragraphs where there's a lot going on. So that first kind of greenish highlight, that is where they are stating what the counterclaim is. So this person is arguing that like you don't have to be the best student in your class in order to be successful in college. That people who didn't get the best grades and weren't like the best students ever can still have a good college experience, okay? So they're gonna acknowledge that counterclaim first. They say, when most people think of a student who will get into college, they imagine someone who gets straight A's and has a great ACT score and is in every curricular activity imaginable, okay? However, that's like that rebuttal transition word, right? While this is certainly a student who will get into college, so they're like, I can see why you would think that, and yes, you're right. It is not the only type of student who will be successful in a university setting. So now I'm restating my thesis. Many students, far less noteworthy, do just fine, and in fact surpass the performance of these all-star students. Okay, now I need to start proving evidence of why that's true, because if I just end it there, like there's no reason that they should believe me over that other phrase, right? So now I need to show evidence of why that stuff in red is more true than the stuff in green, okay? So I say, for instance, in high school, many of these golden students seem to be good at everything, but this is not because they are actually child prodigies. As one expert states, there is a huge disparity between students at a university based on where the student is coming from, because some live in small communities with far less competition than bigger cities. It is hard to tell on paper how talented a student truly is just by GPA. What did I say as one expert states? Anyway, so that's a piece of evidence. Now I'm going to explain that. When these students reach college, they often fall behind the students who did less well in high school because these lesser students have come from huge metropolises with stiff competition and are actually far more skilled than this small town superstar who was only more talented because there was less competition, right? So it's kind of like the big fish in a little pond versus the average sized fish in a big pond argument there. Then another piece of evidence, additionally, GPA, ACT scores, and extracurriculars have no bearing on a student's study habits. Effective study habits are imperative to success in college. And as Dr. Susan Mahoney states in her comprehensive study of necessary traits for collegiate success, she explains the #1 indicator of college success is the ability to utilize suitable habits in an academic setting. So Many students struggle when they go to college because they don't have their parents there to force them to do their homework. They have relied on their parents to make them study rather than developing the ability to regulate their own schedule. Because of this, many students with a good high school GPA do much worse in college because they only have those GPAs as a result of their parents' micromanagement. Other students who had less high GPAs, but little parent help in setting their study schedules, may, in college, actually out-achieve these students who had higher GPAs in high school because they are used to having to self-regulate. So, here they're making the argument that, like, yeah, if your parents say, I'm taking away your cell phone, you're never allowed to see your friends until your homework's done, and you study, you're gonna get good grades, right? But take that away, you go to college, you're like, I'm gonna do whatever I want. All of a sudden, mommy and daddy aren't forcing you to get good grades, and you suck, right? Because you're not studying, because you're not used to having to make yourself do that. However, maybe another student kind of got B's and A's in high school, not like straight A's, because their parents didn't care what they did. And so they were responsible for making sure they got their work done. When they go to college, that's just gonna keep staying the same, because they're used to that. They don't have to be like, oh no, what do I do now that mom and dad aren't here? They were already doing what they needed to do, right? So that's countering that argument, okay? And then I'm gonna reaffirm my thesis and say, thus, a student doesn't need to be on top of his or her class to be successful in college, but rather should work on harnessing both academic competency and a willingness to learn and work hard, because a transcript and application alone won't guarantee success in college. So you see how I acknowledge that some people think, oh yeah, you have to be a perfect student, but then I've explained why that's not true. Yeah? Cool, so a lot of work going on, right? Yay. Yes?
So you need more evidence?
You need at least 2 pieces of evidence, just like you would for your body paragraph. Does that make sense? So if you've already done all your body paragraphs, you would now want to find 2 more quotes for this paragraph too, because you're going to be proving, it's evidence that it specifically disproves the counterclaim and proves yours. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Any other questions? Okay, so in your argument essay this week, you're going to fix all the quotes that need to be burgered, but you're also going to write your counterclaim paragraph. Okay, you want to think of the counterclaim to your thesis. So what other people are saying should be done about this issue that isn't what you think should be done. If you need help of thinking about a possible counterclaim that's reasonable, you can use on that UEN.org online library site the database called Points of View. And remember, I showed you that, and they have both points and counterpoints for any issue listed on that site. So let's say you're like, you think that people should be able to write whatever they want in their Twitter accounts, and you don't see why that would ever be okay not to think. You might go on like line and say, okay, what are other people saying? And then take that idea and then build it into your counterclaim program, okay? You need to, again, find evidence that specifically disproves the counterclaim and shows that your claim is superior. So you want 2 quotes in this paragraph as well. And then you're gonna put your counterclaim in one of 2 places in your essay. You can either put it right after your intro paragraph before your body paragraphs. So you're like, here's my intro, here's what some people think but they're wrong, and then boom, 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 here's all my reasons, right? Or you can say, here's my intro, here's all my reasons why I'm right, here's what some people think but they're wrong, conclusion. And that's just good for flow, because if you put your counterclaim in the middle of your body paragraphs, it's gonna disrupt the flow and feel really weird for your reader. So either put it before all your body paragraphs or after your body paragraphs, but not in the middle. Okay? On Canvas, the assignment is creatively called counterclaim paragraph. So you're just gonna turn it in there. You could either just add it to the document you've been working on for the rest of your essay, or you could put it on its own separate document, but you're gonna turn that in. Okay? Question? Okay, so you have the rest of the class period to work on it. I think you have almost 20 minutes to be working on it. So if you have questions, raise your hand and let me know.